They didn't even wait for the funeral to be over before they started talking about the house. I remember standing by my mother's grave, my hands trembling, face soaked with tears, when I heard my oldest brother whisper to the other, "We'll renovate the guest wing first. Rent it out." My mother wasn't even in the ground yet. And they were already dividing her home like it was a game of Monopoly. I was 24. Fresh out of university. Still reeling from the double blow of losing both parents in a car crash that came out of nowhere. It was supposed to be just another weekend trip for them. A countryside getaway. But they never came back. What did come back was a call from the police. 2 bodies. A totaled vehicle. And a silence so heavy it sat on my chest like a rock for weeks. They were gone. Both of them. And I thought for a moment that my brothers and I would come together in our grief. That maybe this pain would bring us closer. Heal old wounds. I was wrong. So wrong. Barely a week after the funeral, they called me into the living room. Sat me down like I was some outsider. I could feel it coming. The tension. The way they wouldn't look me in the eye. Then my brother James cleared his throat and said, "You know this house is really too big for just you." I blinked. "I don't understand," I said. David, the middle brother, leaned forward. "You're not married. You don't have kids. You don't even live here full time. It makes more sense if James and I take it over. Keep it in the family. Keep it in the family." As if I wasn't part of the family. They handed me a folder. Inside was a contract. Already drawn up. Already signed by them. All I had to do was sign and surrender everything. Our parents' house, the land, and the bank accounts they left behind. And walk away. I laughed at first. Thought it was a joke. Some kind of twisted grief reaction. But their faces were stone cold. "Are you serious?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You'll be fine," James said. "You're smart. Independent. You don't need all this. We'll give you a small stipend." Stipend. From my own parents' estate. I stood up and looked at both of them. "This is what Mom and Dad would have wanted?" I asked. "To throw me out of my own home?" David shrugged. "You're too emotional. You always have been. It's not personal. It's practical." They packed up my things that same weekend. Told the staff not to let me back in without their permission. And just like that, I was homeless. Familyless. Heartbroken. They changed the locks. Cancelled my access to the family accounts. Blocked my number for weeks. As if I was some thief, not their baby sister. But what they didn't know was this. A month before our parents died, my mother gave me a sealed envelope. "If anything ever happens to us," she said, her hand squeezing mine, "promise me you'll open this." I never thought I'd need it. But that night, alone in a cheap hotel room with nowhere to go, I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. And a copy of a will. A U one. Signed and notarized. Dated 10 days before the accident. It named me, the youngest daughter, as the primary heir. Why? Because she trusted me. Because she knew my brothers would turn greedy. Because she saw something in me they never did. I was stunned. I held the paper in my hands for hours. I could have gone to court the next day and taken back everything they stole. But I didn't. Because I wanted them to show their true faces. I wanted them to hang themselves with their own rope. So I let them have the house. Let them tear down the rose garden my mother loved so much. Let them sell off antiques. Fight over furniture. Turn a peaceful home into a battlefield. I watched from a distance. I waited. And every week they got worse. More suspicious of each other. More paranoid. More greedy. Until the house that once held love and laughter became a war zone. And when the final blow came, they never saw it coming. Because betrayal is loud. But revenge. Revenge moves in silence. 3 months passed. 3 long, agonizing months. I stayed silent the entire time. No calls. No emails. No legal threats. To them it probably looked like I'd vanished. But in truth I was watching. I knew the staff at the house. Some had been with our family for over a decade. One of the groundskeepers, Mr. Felix, used to sneak me mangoes from the back orchard when I was a kid. When James and David threw me out, they tried to fire everyone who remembered the old way, the loving way. But Mr. Felix stayed. Quiet. Unbothered. And loyal. Every week he sent me updates. Pictures. Voice notes. Little whispers of what was unfolding inside the walls that used to be my home. It started with money. James was spending recklessly. Cars. Watches. Hosting parties with his new girlfriend, a flashy influencer who only cared about Instagram posts and champagne. David, more reserved but equally dangerous, began to question the bank withdrawals. He accused James of emptying the joint account without consulting him. The arguments began small. A few shouting matches. Some doors slammed. But greed has a way of turning blood into poison. One night, Felix sent me an audio recording. James and David in a screaming match. "You think I don't know what you're doing? You moved the land documents to your office. You're trying to sell the East plot behind my back. Don't be stupid, James. You're the one who took $50 million out of the account last month. For what? A damn necklace. Don't bring my fiancé into this." They fought like strangers. No loyalty. No trust. And that was exactly what I wanted. Because while they were tearing each other apart, I was preparing. I hired a lawyer. A quiet, meticulous woman named Ifioma who specialized in inheritance disputes. When I showed her the sealed will, she nodded slowly and said, "You hold all the power. They won't see it coming." But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I needed more cracks to show. More rot to spread. I started sending anonymous letters. One to James. One to David. Typed, "Untraceable. Your brother is planning to sell the main house without your signature. You might want to check the deed again." Then another. "There's a new account in your name you didn't open. Look into it before it's too late." They took the bait like hungry wolves. James started spying on David. David started locking his office drawers. They changed passwords. Fired staff. Even installed cameras in the house. The mansion that used to echo with laughter now echoed with suspicion. Then the girlfriend entered the chat. Her name was Mimi. Young. Beautiful. Cunning. She started cozying up to David. Whispering in his ear. Dropping hints about James being unfaithful. Stealing from the estate. Plotting behind his back. It worked. One night, James walked in on Mimi and David talking quietly in the library. He exploded. Threw a vase. Called her a traitor. Accused her of trying to steal the house. The next day Mimi was gone. And so was James's Rolex. And his laptop. And his safe key. I couldn't have written it better myself. At this point, the brothers were no longer speaking to each other. They avoided the dining room. Ate separately. Slept with one eye open. I heard James even moved his mattress into the hallway one night just to keep an eye on the front door. Meanwhile, I was working. Gathering every document. Every voice note. Every signed copy of that valid, binding will. Because now it was time. I booked an appointment with the estate registrar. I walked in wearing a simple black dress and no makeup. No need for drama. No need for fireworks. Just a quiet storm. When I submitted the documents, the registrar raised her brow. "This changes everything," she said. "Yes," I replied calm. "It does." They verified the will. Called in the original notary. Confirmed every signature. Within 2 weeks, I had court approval to claim the estate. The day I walked back into the house, it was raining. Poetic, really. I didn't announce my arrival. I walked in through the side gate Felix kept unlocked. The same gate my brothers forced me out of months ago. James was on the phone in the hallway, pacing and furious. David was upstairs yelling at someone over Zoom. Both too busy drowning in their own chaos to notice I was even there. Till I spoke. "I believe you're standing on my rug." James turned, confused. Then pale. David came rushing down the stairs. "What is she doing here?" he barked. I smiled. "I'm home." James laughed bitterly. "You have some nerve showing your face after the stunt you pulled." "Stunt?" I raised a folder. "This is a court order. Recognizing the last valid will of our late parents. The one naming me as the sole heir." Dead silence. David tried to grab the papers. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I said. "Feel free to call the estate office. They've already updated the title deed. As of this morning, the house, the land, the accounts, they're all under my name." James opened his mouth, but no words came. I turned to walk into the main lounge. Took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I inhaled the scent of jasmine from my mother's favorite air freshener. I was finally home. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They just stood there, like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Poetic justice. But I wasn't done. I had one more surprise. They had no words. Just stunned, lifeless eyes as they stared at the stamped court order. I sat down in the living room, right in the center of the sofa they used to forbid me from sitting on. That ugly gray one our father hated. I crossed my legs and looked at them both. "Do sit," I said. "We have a lot to discuss." James scoffed, but his legs gave way before his pride could catch up. David followed slowly, cautiously, like he expected me to explode. They were right to be afraid. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I wasn't here to fight. I was here to win. "You both forged a will. That's criminal." David immediately raised his hands. "It was James's idea." James turned sharply. "Don't start with me, David. You signed it. You told her she was a liability." They started arguing again right in front of me like I wasn't even there. I leaned back and watched them crumble. "You know," I said softly, "when Mom and Dad died I thought we'd come together. That maybe, just maybe, we'd honor them by standing as one." James laughed dryly. "Don't act like you're the saint in this." "Oh, I'm not," I replied. "I'm just the one who didn't lie, cheat, and steal to get ahead." I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was still falling, now gentle, rhythmic, like a lullaby. I turned back to them. "I've been quiet, patient. But let's be clear, I'm not here to forgive you. I'm here to let you know what comes next." Their faces tightened. "Starting tomorrow," I said, "you're both out of this house. You have one night to pack your things." James stood abruptly. "You can't kick us out. We're your brothers. Tell that to the girl you tossed out with 2 suitcases and no money." David swallowed hard. "Where do you expect us to go?" "I hear cheap hotels are running deals," I said. "Should be affordable if you sell your Rolex, James." He glared at me, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. I walked over and placed the court file back into my bag. "You wanted this house. You betrayed your own blood for it. You fought each other like animals over it." I stepped closer, my voice low. "And now you can watch it all slip through your fingers." They had nothing left to say. No threats. No defiance. Just silence. That night I stayed in my parents' room. I lay on my mother's side of the bed, her old scarf still hanging on the bedpost. I clutched it tightly and wept, not because I was sad, but because justice had finally come. In the morning I walked downstairs to find James already gone. No goodbye. No drama. Just a half-empty bottle of whiskey and the faint smell of his cologne in the hallway. David stayed until noon. He didn't speak to me. Just kept packing in silence. As he rolled his suitcase past me, he paused. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, barely above a whisper. I looked him in the eye. "But you did. And you let him do it too." He nodded once and walked out the door. It was done. The house was mine. But more importantly, my peace had returned. For the next week I brought back the old staff. Felix returned. The cook, Mama Grace, came back with tears in her eyes. We scrubbed the house clean of the betrayal, of the lies, of the bitterness they left behind. And I started to breathe again. But karma hadn't finished with them. A month later I got a call from an old friend who worked in real estate. She'd seen James at a government auction, begging for funding, trying to flip land that didn't exist. Word was, Mimi had drained his account before disappearing to Dubai with another man. David, I heard, was caught in a tax evasion scandal after one of James's failed shell companies left his name on documents. He'd been summoned to court. Rumor had it he was selling his car to afford a lawyer. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just whispered, "Balance has been restored." One evening as I sat in the garden reading one of Mom's favorite books, I thought about forgiveness. I still wasn't there. Maybe I never would be. But I had rebuilt myself. Piece by piece. Alone. Without them. And that made all the difference. I didn't redecorate the house immediately. For the first few weeks I just let it breathe. Let it be quiet. Let the air settle from all the shouting and scheming and broken trust. I kept the curtains drawn wide, letting in as much light as possible because I refused to live in shadows anymore. I opened every window. I burned my mother's favorite incense, lemongrass and cinnamon, and let the scent fill every room. Sometimes I'd catch myself standing in the hallway, hand pressed against the wall, wondering if I'd ever truly feel at home again. Betrayal does that to you. It turns familiarity into suspicion. But slowly the house started to feel like mine again. One Saturday morning I pulled out my parents' old journals. They used to write everything: groceries, dreams, letters they never sent. And as I read page after page, I began to remember why I fought so hard to return. Because this house wasn't just bricks and doors and titles. It was them. It was my mother's humming in the kitchen as she baked coconut cake. It was my father's low laughter echoing from the study. It was my childhood, my memories, the one place in the world where I was always safe. Until they took that away. No, not they. My brothers. I still struggle to call them that. The word feels tainted. Like a wound that never quite closed. A few people in town heard what happened. They tried to ask me questions. How could they do that to you? Weren't you the baby of the family? Are you still speaking to them? I'd smile politely and say, we're not close. Because no one needs to know how deep the cut was to understand that it bled. I threw myself into the estate. Renovated the West Wing. Opened it as a co-working space for young women starting businesses. Something my mother would have loved. I partnered with local schools to offer scholarships in my father's name. The land they tried to steal? I leased it out to small organic farmers. Gave them affordable plots and contracts. It wasn't about profit, it was about purpose. The kind of legacy my parents would have wanted. But then one rainy evening, karma knocked again. Literally. I was in the living room when I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow. Hesitant. I opened the door and found David standing there. No umbrella. No suitcase. Just a soaked shirt clinging to his shoulders and a folded newspaper in his hand. I didn't speak. Didn't invite him in. He looked exhausted. Smaller than I remembered. Like the betrayal had aged him. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. I saw this. He handed me the paper. On the front page was a photo of one of the girls from my scholarship program, beaming, holding a certificate. The headline read, "Local woman rebuilds family estate into center for change." He cleared his throat. That's really something, Cam. I stayed silent. I know I have no right to be here, he said, but I wanted to tell you. I'm sorry. Truly. I was a coward. I let James run the show. I let money blind me. You let power blind you, I said quietly. He nodded, swallowing hard. You can't undo what you did, I continued. You took everything from me when I had no one left. I know. And now that your world's fallen apart, you remember where you left me? His eyes dropped. I'm not proud of who I became. Neither am I said. But at least I changed. He looked up. I barely recognize you. Good, I said, stepping back. Because the girl you betrayed? She doesn't live here anymore. He stood there for a few more seconds, rain trickling down his temples, lips trembling like he wanted to beg, but knew better. I hope you stay well, he whispered. Then he turned and walked away. And I didn't stop him. Didn't ask him to come back. Didn't offer shelter or forgiveness or warmth. Because sometimes the best healing is distance. And the best revenge is peace they'll never be part of again. It was a Thursday afternoon when I got the call. I'd just finished meeting with a group of girls from the mentoring program. They were laughing, buzzing with plans and dreams. One wanted to open a hair studio, another was building an app to help single moms budget. I left the meeting feeling light, proud, like maybe all the pain had been worth it. Then my phone rang. It was the police. Miss Camille, the officer said. We're calling about your brother. James. I froze. The officer continued. He was arrested this morning. Fraud, embezzlement, identity theft. He's been under investigation for months. My lips parted but no sound came out. James, who always swore he was too smart to get caught? James, who called me weak for being emotional. The officer went on. He was using shell companies to launder money through failing businesses. Took investor money. Disappeared with it. Some of his business partners came forward recently. My chest tightened. I asked, "Why are you calling me? You're listed as next of kin. He doesn't have anyone else." I sat in silence for a moment. Then said, "I'm not his next anything." The officer hesitated. "Understood. But he asked if you'd come. He's being held at the central station." That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I felt sorry for him, but because part of me needed to see him. To look into the eyes of the man who once threw me into the street like I was trash. To face the ghost who haunted my past. The next morning I went. They led me through a hallway of cold, gray walls. The air smelled like disinfectant and shame. James was sitting in the visiting room. He looked nothing like the brother I remembered. His skin was pale. His hair thinner. He had a tremor in his hand as he sipped from a plastic cup. He looked up when I entered, and for the first time in years, he didn't smirk. Didn't sneer. Didn't wear that smug, untouchable expression. He looked human. "Camille," he said softly. "You came." "I didn't come for you," I replied. "I came for closure." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that." "No. You don't deserve anything from me. But I'll give it anyway because I'm not like you." His eyes welled. He looked down. "They said you're facing 10 years, I continued. 12 maybe, he said. "Unless I cut a deal." "You always looked for shortcuts," I said. He sighed. "I ruined everything. I thought I was untouchable." "You weren't," I said. "You never were. You just had enablers." He looked up at me then. "And you? You're really running the estate now? Turning it into all that community work?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence told him everything. "You're stronger than I thought," he said. "No," I replied. "I was always strong. You just didn't see it because you were too busy stepping on me." There was a long pause. "I don't expect forgiveness," he whispered. "Good," I said. "Because I didn't come to give it." He blinked slowly, shoulders slumping like the weight of those words had finally crushed whatever pride he had left. "I hope prison gives you time to reflect," I added. "Because that's all you'll have. Time. And maybe regret." I stood up to leave. He didn't call after me. Didn't beg. Didn't try to guilt me. He just sat there, a man undone by his own greed. As I walked out of the station, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Not from pain. Not from memory. But from the burden of needing them to apologize or change or love me. I no longer needed anything from either of them. As I had built something for myself. A life filled with purpose, peace, and a future untouched by their betrayal. And that, to me, was the sweetest justice of all. Months passed. And with each one I felt a little less of the girl I used to be. The girl who stood outside our family home barefoot, with nothing but a box of her clothes and a broken heart. That girl had died. And in her place stood a woman who had survived fire and refused to burn. The old estate became the heart of a movement. We called it the Haven. A safe place for young women thrown away by their own families, just like I was. We offered them rooms, food, education, therapy, and, most importantly, belonging. The media eventually caught wind of it. Local journalists came. Then a few national ones. They wanted to know how I did it. How a girl from nothing rebuilt a legacy from ashes. I never told them everything. Because this wasn't about becoming famous. It was about becoming free. During one of our community events, a scholarship ceremony for some of the girls, I spotted a familiar face standing near the gate. It was Raymond. Yes, my other brother. The one who thought signing me off the will was just business. He looked older. Tired. His clothes were expensive, but his eyes were hollow. We hadn't spoken since our last confrontation. But now here he was, standing among the very people he once said weren't our class. He motioned for me to come over. I could have ignored him. Could have had security walk him out. But I walked toward him, calm and composed. He tried to smile. "Camille, it's been a while." "Yes, it has," I replied. "I saw the articles," he said. "The Haven, The scholarships. It's impressive. It's important, I corrected him. He nodded. I was wrong. Yes, I said. You were. He blinked. I came to apologize. I tilted my head. Apologize? Or salvage what's left of your reputation? His face fell. And that's when I realized something. He wasn't just apologizing. He was unraveling. I lost everything, he admitted quietly. Bad deals. Divorce. IRS audits. I've got nothing left. Not even the pride to pretend. I stared at him. This man, once so smug, so sure, so cruel, was now just a shell of himself. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity either. What I felt was distance. He was no longer a villain in my life. He was a stranger passing through the edge of a chapter one had already finished. I'm not here for revenge, I said. I already got mine. You gave it to me the moment you underestimated me. He exhaled. Camille, I was afraid of you. That surprised me. Afraid of me? He nodded. Afraid of what you represented. Change. Accountability. Someone who couldn't be controlled. I stayed quiet. Then he said something I never thought I'd hear. You were always meant to lead. We were just too blinded by our egos to see it. I let those words settle. And then I turned to walk away. Not out of anger. But because I didn't need his validation. Not anymore. I stood on the podium later that evening addressing the crowd. The girls. The volunteers. The mentors. I looked out and saw hundreds of faces. Smiling, cheering, hopeful. And I thought of my parents. How proud they would have been. Not because I had the house or the money. But because I took pain and turned it into purpose. I closed my speech with the same words my mother once told me when I was a child. A soft heart isn't a weakness. It's a weapon the world doesn't expect. And that night, as the lights dimmed and the laughter echoed into the stars, I walked through the halls of the estate, not as a visitor, but as its rightful queen. Not out of spite, but because I had earned every brick, every breath, every victory. Karma didn't have to be loud. Sometimes it was just the sound of peace after a storm that should have killed you. And I was still standing. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and share with someone who needs to hear this. And of course, subscribe for a brand new revenge story every single day. I'll see you in the next episode.